Well, we want to say thank you for joining us today. We are starting a brand new series called Out of Control. And for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be talking about just this idea of what it means to allow God to be in control of our lives. And so we are so excited about that. And I've got Randy Wade, one of our co-pastors, here with me. And Randy, we're joined by some of the best looking people in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex here.
Indeed we are.
And so we thank you guys for being with us. And why don't we give the people at home watching a hand and just encourage them as they join in with us on this study. Can we do that? Let's encourage them. Over these next 5 weeks, we're going to be talking about what it means to allow God to be in control. And so tonight, we're going to have a great discussion about that and have a lot of fun. And so, Randy, why don't you start us off with that?
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever noticed how much better we feel when we are in control? My daughter just turned 16, and anybody that's raised a kid through this age 16, pray for us, because she's a good kid. She's a good kid, but whenever she's driving, I mean, I'm like, I want her to do everything exactly by the book. But yet when I'm driving, I'm like, changing the radio dial. She's like, I want a new station. I'm like, you keep your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel, whatever, 10 and 2. But whenever I'm the one driving, I feel like I've got more freedom because I feel like I'm in control. And I don't like to admit it. I've checked a text a time or two, because I feel like I'm more in control. And I think that we all tend to have, I guess, just kind of that emotion that it just feels better whenever we're the ones in the driver's seat. But the pressure of wanting to be in control has really taken a toll on us just as people and as a society. You think about the amount of stress that people find themselves under, the pressure, the worry, the anxiety. Every time we talk as pastors from the platform about anxiety, the feedback we get is, I needed to hear that. Man, I am living that right now. And so we know that anxiety is a massive, massive issue. And then depression, all of these things, I think, are related to this idea of being in control. And whenever you feel like you've got to have all of the answers and all of the control, it just takes a toll on us. And so we wind up being, a society of people, even as Christians, that are taking medication and lots of counseling, having to seek help from lots of other people because of all of the stress and worry that we put on ourselves.
Yeah, Randy, we talked about this, and it seems like every time we teach, and what we've said is what seems to get the most just relating to people is this idea of anxiety, that we really are living in a world that's struggling with this. And the thing is that Jesus taught us is that it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it shouldn't be that way for us as believers. And so I love the passage of Scripture in Matthew 11, chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, and he said this, he said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden." And I just want you to listen to these words, because I think oftentimes we feel like we're laboring and we're heavy laden. And he said, "And I will give you rest." And then he said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so Jesus is describing really a lot of us when he talks about this, that this idea of laboring and being heavy laden, and it seems like that for so many people, life just seems way too heavy. And I don't know if that's your experience or not, but as we talk to people and work with people in the church and outside of the church, it just seems like life is really heavy. And so this passage is so encouraging to me, because it's Jesus telling us that that's not the way life is supposed to be. And yet, so many people are not experiencing the life that Jesus has called us to. And so really, that's what this series is about. This series is about learning to experience life the way Jesus has set it up that it's supposed to be, instead of the way that we're struggling through it. And so let's just have a little discussion about this. Do we have any control freaks in the room? Anybody a control freak?
What are you laughing at?
You got
You've
two
known me a
hands
long
up.
time. Oh, okay.
Anybody married to a control freak? I've found that I always get the more truthful answers that way, So let me ask you this. What do you think it means to be a control freak?
For me, I like to manage expectations, and I like to manage the result. And so if I can somehow create the right expectation, then that gives me better control over how to get to the result. So control freak for me is really expectations and results.
What about for others of you? How does that manifest itself?
I might not even realize I'm in control freak mode, but others around me will.
Are there any others particularly
that? No, I know I'm in that mode because it sometimes wreaks havoc on all those around me, because it's like I have expectations that somebody else does not know about somehow.
Right.
And when things don't go along those expectations, when they don't get met, and then I kind of, freak out, I guess. Everyone else is like, okay, settle down now, because we can tell things are falling apart, and you have not met your...
So for those of you that are control freaks, what are the problems that you see it causing in your life?
For me, it was overwhelming anxiety. Whenever I finally got to the breaking point where I knew I had to get some help, I sought out help, and it was negatively impacting my kids was the main ones, because I'd try to protect them from everything. And I was constantly, no, don't do that. You're going to fall. You're going to get hurt. You're going to do that. And actually, my counselor, she said, are you going on a vacation this summer? And this was a couple summers ago. I said, no, I don't think we have anything planned. She said, well, you need to go on one. And she said, everything you do needs to be something you normally wouldn't do. And so, like a lot of you, if you went to Colorado to go whitewater rafting with your family, it's because you're going to have fun. But I would never take my kids on that, because I was like, well, what if one of them falls out of the raft and hits their head, or any number of things. So that's what we did, and it was really hard, one, to let go of them to do the whitewater rafting or the horseback riding, and that actually was scary when we went on a course that was a little harder than we should have. But anyway, we all made it out.
We got any video of that?
We're crossing rivers, we're going up, and I'm just like, I am going to kill my kids here, and I didn't mean to. But what I realized in the process is they're very risk averse, and it's because of my hovering for so long, right. And so I think it's negatively impacted them, and for me personally, it created a lot of anxiety.
Mm. Is there anybody that would say, I'm a control freak, but I like it that way, like it feels like it works? Anybody feel like it works? You feel like what? I think sometimes people are like, well, what's the problem? What's the problem with that? And the reality is that oftentimes, and what Randy was just describing, is it may work for you, but it doesn't work for people around you. And I heard somebody say, I was trying to think of who it was that said this, but somebody said, if it doesn't work for other people that you care about, it doesn't really work for you. But oftentimes we feel like, man, I'm okay with this because I'm the one that gets to hold the reins. So let's move on a little bit. Has there ever been a time when you felt like you were really out of control?
So I had an instance, I guess about 3 or 4 years ago. I'd just suffered, I had my second hernia surgery, was undergoing some back issues and some back pains. And along the way, I kept getting an opportunity to get off a truck and get into the office, and I kept shutting that door. I felt like at the time we couldn't afford the pay cut. It was going to significantly hurt us. So I just kept shutting that door. And then the very last surgery that I had, I was praying. I was like, God, show me what I need to do, because this isn't working for me. I can't just keep having surgeries. And I go to work the next day, and I get offered the same job that I've turned down 3 other times. And I'm like, okay, I got to do this. But I didn't know how financially we were going to be able to handle it. And God provided for us. 6 months later, she actually ended up getting the pay raise that I actually took a pay cut on. And it was just amazing how God's faithfulness just provided for us.
Mm. That's good.
Somebody else, a time that you just knew that you were out of control.
I think for us, our youngest daughter was born with a cataract, and a lot of times that's not discovered on an infant. But hers was discovered at 2 weeks old, and then she had surgery at 8 weeks. And so during that time, we were definitely not in control of anything. And you think, here you have this baby, it's healthy, perfect, but she's going to have surgery, and she's going to have a lens implant. What does her future look like? And so we learned through that God is in control. He provided us, because we struggled with some infertility with her. Had we gotten pregnant with her when we first started trying, then we wouldn't have been close to the doctors that she needed to be able to do the lens implant, because most doctors didn't do that on infants. And so just to see, God working through her and the doctors, and just his faithfulness in providing not only the initial doctor to discover it, but the surgeons and things through that process. We were not in control.
Yeah. So in y'all's marriage, I don't remember this from the hand showing. Is one of y'all more controlling than the other? Right. So how did y'all respond to that situation differently?
I was probably more outward, and he's definitely probably more inward. He relates inwardly and doesn't really, you can probably tell that, but just by looking at him. But, we had a very strong church home at that time, and they really loved on us and just held our hand through it. And just so much prayer was over that baby, and so she had one surgery that it was on her retina, and it was, when we went in, there was damage to the retina, the optic nerve and everything, and so they said she would, have a severe impairment. But in the surgery, the doctor comes out after 20 minutes, and there was no damage, that he had seen previously. So that's God's hand and his miracle. And she's athletic and, just a normal teenager.
Yeah, that's great.
So
thanks for sharing that with us. Somebody else, a time that you felt like you were out of control.
I guess it was 7 years ago now that Carly's dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and talk about not having any control over something. I mean, it's a terminal disease, and there is no cure, and you have zero control over it. And so for us, that was a big deal, and I can let her talk more about it. But to see how she and her family handled it, it was unbelievable. They really looked at it as an opportunity to make people aware of this, and used it as a chance to show their strength in Christ, and it was unbelievable. And her dad passed away, I guess 2 months ago, and at that funeral, talking to the amount of people that we talked to that they impacted through that, and it was it's just a situation that they had no control over, but chose to look at it in a little bit different way.
I know that's really fresh, Carly. I mean, can you talk about it just for a minute?
Yes,
Tell us about just the realization that you were out of control.
My dad at the time, he was 62 years old.
Oh, wow.
I was pregnant with twins. Trey and I had just been married a few years.
Really stress-free time.
Yeah, we just, moved into a new house, and things were, we were both working, and then all of a sudden I get a call from my dad, and I was driving home from work, and he told me, he goes, I just want to let you know that I went in for some testing, and I have early onset Alzheimer's. And at the time, I was, that, like Trey said, that was the definition of no control. There's no cure. There's nothing to do. It's just then to wait and let it take over your body, so we were out of control of what happened to us, but we were able to control how we reacted to it, and what we showed people, about our faith, and just that we knew that, this was his earthly body, and he was, going to be fully healed and restored in heaven. And that's what we had faith in. And we just tried to make sure to always let that be what we talked about. It wasn't a doom and gloom. It was just, this is what is happening now, but, he's going to be restored. So
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
I just got one thing. So I'm a fireman in Dallas, also paramedic, and one of the things about the job is we constantly see people at their worst, and so when they're ultimately hurting, sometimes we're their last call. 911 is their last call. They don't have anything else, and so we see a lot of hurting people. So I feel like every time I go into work, like the night before, I have to say a prayer to get rid of any anxiousness, just because it's like, whether I show it to anybody or not, it's somewhat stressful to some extent, because these people are looking to you to answer their problems. And a lot of the times I'm like, the only answer is Jesus. And I get to share that sometimes in the back of the rescue. But, a lot of the times it's like, this medication's not going to work. But, there's just so many things that we can do. But, I just have to prepare myself for the doom and gloom, but, try to be that light. But, I just feel like every shift is, a little bit of hopelessness to some extent, and a little bit of out of control. Cause it's like, there's not much these people can do, because a lot of it's medical, and so they're at their wits' end, and it's difficult. As much as it can be stressful, it's also a blessing. Yeah. And that it shows me the important things, so anyways.
Yeah, and I know as we talk about this, it seems to me that most of the time when people feel most out of control, it's with their kids. It just, as a parent, I've got a 6-year-old to a 20-year-old, and there's just various degrees of feeling out of control. And I remember one time when my middle son, Noah, he was just a few months old, and all of a sudden he had a really high fever. I was supposed to leave the next day to go on a mission trip with a bunch of teenagers, and we took him to Parkland, and they have, his fever was 103 or something like that, and he's 2 or 3 months old at the time, and they're sticking needles in him everywhere, and we're watching this, and that was that's the first time I ever remember feeling like I have zero ability to control this. They don't know what it is. It's not like take them to a better doctor. It's like they're doing everything they can, but nobody has a clue. And I recognize, that there's so much of life like that it feels like we just are not in control. And at the end of the day, the thing that's interesting to me about it, or somewhat ironic, is the things that cause us to to feel most out of control is when it's with our kids, and when we recognize that we're also God's children. And that God also has that same sort of wanting to take care of us as well. And so I'm really excited about this series. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I think it applies to so many people. And so over these next 5 weeks, we want to encourage you at home to really dig in, really lean in, and have some great discussions. And so thank you guys for joining us. Why don't we encourage the people at home as we throw it back to them and encourage them to have a great discussion as well. Can we do that?